The following banter is not sanctioned by any informed or influential person and is open to refutement. Just kidding. If you don't agree with what we're saying, just go fuck yourself. Okay, bye.
So anyway, this is a thing that we do weekly to sort of break down and emotionally uh, break down as well regarding the state of affairs in this fucking world. Anyway,
Yeah, it's called Leftist Lens. I'm Matt. That's James. And here we go. All right. So recently, the federal government, was going to announce that they're going to change the classification of marijuana from a class 1 controlled substance or schedule 1 controlled substance to a schedule 3 controlled substance. The main difference of that is schedule 1 is where like heroin and stuff is. Those are drugs that have no medicinal benefit and are highly controlled with potential for abuse. Class 2 are drugs with medicinal benefit, but also highly controlled because of potential abuse. And class 3 is drugs with medicinal benefit that are not at risk of dangerous abuse. So that's a good thing. It effectively might legalize marijuana, at least medicinally, nationwide. But the one thing I wanted to talk about is I saw a pharmacist on TikTok that says he works for CVS, gloating about this fact because he said CVS will now be allowed to dispense marijuana to people with a prescription for it. And he mentioned that pharmacies are more highly regulated than the marijuana dispensaries as they currently exist. And he felt that this classification may force the marijuana dispensaries to behave more like pharmacies and fall under their regulation, which according to him was expensive and that they may not be able to do, which may put them out of business, which makes me wonder, did the pharmacy lobby have anything to do with the change in classification?
well, I think if you go back to, I think Colorado was one of the first states to legalize it in any form, and the monetary benefit to the state of Colorado was fucking enormous. It was huge.
Right.
And that was still before um, entities that were selling cannabis in any form could actually use the banks to, manage their finances.
Right.
This would allow that. I mean, there's so many things that moving it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 changes. However, and I'm not 100% equipped to actually address this point, but I did come across a post this morning because the one of the most appealing aspects of moving it from 1 to 3 was that it should open it up to legitimate medicinal research and just research in general, which it
Right.
was prohibited from. Now, the person that was making this TikTok was also, I think, a pharmacist, was sort of pulling back the reins on the idea that this is going to free up cannabis for research, because apparently there are other acts that have been passed in years prior that are going to still interfere with this.
Theory, if the government were to go ahead with rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, it should enhance research opportunities, right? Right, with any other substance other than cannabis. But because we're talking about cannabis here, there are other things in place. In late 2022, the Medical Marijuana and Cannabidiol Research Expansion Act was put into law. And this law essentially says that despite how cannabis is scheduled by the government, there are still going to be restrictions in place, regardless, and that the DEA has ultimate control over who the practitioners are that are allowed to do this research and where their research material is coming from. This act also states that the DEA needs to register more researchers, but doesn't have any sort of enforcement to make sure that happens. So unfortunately, most researchers are still in the same boat and still heavily restricted. However, larger corporations like universities, state governments, and just large corporations will probably get in the game now because it's less scary.
But the bottom line is that this is a huge step. Now, was this a step that because Biden administration, I think when he took office, wasn't going to touch this. He was never going to be in favor of changing the classification for pot. I think he was very clear about that. Did he do this to pander? Because he's fucking flailing right now.
That could be. That's a good point.
And I don't.
But why is it, it's interesting though, if he's pandering to young people with that by this reclassification, why is he still so steadfastly pissing off young people with everything else he does?
Yeah, is it gonna? That's my point. Is this pandering going to make any difference in legit support that he would have in November?
I
I
honestly doubt it, considering more than half the country, if you want to get a prescription for marijuana, you can. In fact, more than half the country, it's legal recreationally. You don't even need a prescription. 27 states, I think.
Hmm.
And I don't know how many have it medicinally, but it's obviously higher than that. In fact, I live in one. Pennsylvania, you can get it medicinally, but not recreationally.
Same here in Florida right now.
So I don't know how that. I don't think anyone really cares that the schedule changed, because it doesn't really. Current users, I don't think, are affected at all by this, unless that pharmacist is right and they have to start going to CVS to get it instead of, whatever.
Well, but okay. So back to
joint dispensary they got.
Okay, but so let's go back to the point you were making about CVS before I derailed things. It's not going to be a situation where the only source for medicinal pot is going to be the pharmacies, CVS being the example. How would it put out of business the dispensaries that exist?
Well, I don't really know what the regulations the guy that I saw on TikTok was talking about, but he said pharmacies were more highly regulated than the dispensaries are, which I actually kind of find hard to believe, because there's a ridiculous amount of regulations to be able to open a dispensary. I know we went through, because Pennsylvania hasn't had medical marijuana but for like 4 or 5 years. And from the time that the law was passed to the time the first dispensary in Erie, where I live, opened, was like 3 or 4 years, because all the hoops the people that wanted to open the dispensaries had to jump through to get a license for it. I'm not saying it's easy to open a pharmacy. If it were, there'd probably be more of those too. But I find it hard to believe they're not highly regulated. In fact, I do have a medical marijuana license, and when I go to the dispensary, there's all kinds of shit I have to do there that I don't have to do at a dispensary. First of all, the door is locked, and you have to knock on the door, and then you go inside, and there's a second door that's also locked, and there's a security guard sitting there that checks your medical marijuana card and your driver's license to make sure that you are you and you have a valid medical marijuana license. And then he opens the second door and lets you go in. When you pick out your stuff on a kiosk, and then you go up to pay for it, you have to put your license, your medical marijuana license, down on the table in view of the camera, so that whoever wants to look at it later can make sure that when you're paying for it, that you're the person that has the prescription. I don't have to do that when I go pick up anything at CVS.
But I wonder. I mean, you're not implying that. First of all, is it this way? I've never been in a dispensary, so is it this way in every dispensary?
I don't know, because I've only ever went to one. So
well, yeah, and so then the next question is that dispensary going above and beyond what they're expected to do, or is that the bare minimum that they're expected to do under, in this case, it would be state law?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I can only speak about what it's like in Pennsylvania, but there are a few dispensaries around here. But the one that I go to it because it gives a 20% off discount to veterans. It's the main reason why I go there. But it is the largest one. They're all over the state. They're in Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Philadelphia. They're everywhere. Some of the other ones are more regional, like they're only in the northwestern Pennsylvania or only in southeastern Pennsylvania, for example. But this one is the biggest one that has places everywhere. In fact, there's 3 of them here in Erie.
What's the name of it? Because it's probably one that's
called Rise.
It's not one that we have here that I know of anyway.
Yeah, I do think they're probably different in every state, because you have to have a state specific. Every state has different rules, and you have to have a state specific license to be a dispensary. So I don't know if it's cost beneficial to get licensed all over. Although it's also a nation industry. As it gets bigger, obviously, because of capitalism, bigger ones will acquire smaller ones, and eventually they'll just be like 1 or 2 dispensaries nationwide. That's how that works. That's what happened with pharmacies. That's why there's only Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid now, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much.
So these are the ones that. Oh yeah, and see, Florida dispensaries are still cash only because that has to do with the federal classification of it, and the banks won't touch it.
Yeah, so the one I go to, they have an ATM in there, but you can use a debit card, not a credit card, just a debit card
Uh-huh.
at the machine. But when you look at your bank statement, the it acts like it was an ATM. You know, it just takes out. It doesn't say anything about where you spent it. It's just like cash withdrawal for whatever the amount was that you used at the when you were paying the person.
So I just pulled up a list of Florida dispensaries, and there are several that are in my town that feel like they are national chains. One is called True Leave. The other one is called Move, MUV, with the two fucking Motley Crue dots over the U because reasons. Um,
Haagen-Dazs.
yeah.
They have that too.
And what was the other one? Certera Wellness. I drive by them all the time, and they are like immaculate. They are very well maintained and very professional looking, which makes me feel like they're not just a local Florida thing. It's probably a national chain. And
yeah, I'm not familiar with any of those. We have Rise and we have Cure Leaf. Those are the only two that we have here in Erie. But it is also like the Rise facility. It's nothing in Erie is beautiful on the outside. This is a Rust Belt city that is rusted, well rusted. Yeah. So it's not beautiful on the outside, although it does have a nice coat of paint. But the inside is immaculate, and it is extremely professional looking. And they have pharmacists there, but they're clearly not pharmacists, but they call themselves pharmacists. I doubt they went to pharmacy school because they're kids, basically. They're like 20, 21.
I mean, I think I mentioned last week that there's a referendum on the Florida ballot for November. I'll definitely be voting on that level stuff that finally moves it from medical to medical and recreational. And I think that's going to pass resoundingly.
Yeah,
and
we don't get to vote on that stuff here in Pennsylvania directly, but our governor is in support of legalizing it recreationally, and I don't know. We'll see.
So who's opposed to it? That's the thing. Who's opposing this?
I don't know. My mom. I asked her to give me a ride to the dispensary yesterday when we were out, and she's like, "No, I don't believe in that."
Wow. Okay.
Like, okay.
I don't know. It's amazing to me. I mean, if you look at the last fucking 15, 20 years and the strides that are now finally being made in this are encouraging. I'm glad we're finally to this point. And I think the move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 is a huge move in that regard. And I'm hoping that whoever comes into office, if we still have elections in the next fucking 8 to 16 years, it doesn't have the ability to fucking reverse this. I'm sure they do, and I hope it becomes a really difficult thing for anybody to interfere with.
Yeah, I think it's a train that's got a lot of momentum. I mean, it's happened fast, really. I mean, I don't know when the first medicinal's been around for a lot longer, but Colorado was the first state to recreationally legalize it, and that wasn't that long ago. And now there's 27 states.
Yeah,
that happened really fast.
Yeah, it really did. And the only reason it happens at all is not because this is a good thing for people who are using it, but because it's making somebody money.
Oh, of course. That's why. That's profit motive is the only thing that causes anything to happen in a capitalist country.
Yeah, and I'm going to assume that, again, the Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 move, in terms of how that should open up the banking system for these dispensaries, I'm waiting to see which banks decide to stick their foot in the mud and say, no, we're not going to allow dispensaries to bank with us, because there's going to be some. It's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, the old school banks probably will.
Yeah.
New banks will spring up to cater to them. I'm sure of it.
Oh, yeah, that's true too.
You only need $50 million to start a bank. So if I ever have $50 million, that might be the first thing I do.
Is that a real number?
It was at the beginning of the pandemic. It may have changed, or not at the beginning of the pandemic, but after the 2008 financial crisis, when all the banks failed, I saw a lot of banks failed and a lot of new banks sprang up. And I saw an interview with some guy that started a bank, and he was like, yeah, I did all the research, and all you need is $50 million to start a bank. And so he went to a bunch of investors, found $50 million and started a bank to fill the void from the bank failures of 2008, 2009.
I've never even,
It's been a lot of years, so it may cost more than that now, but it's still not as much as you might think, is what
I just always assumed that the whole banking system was a cabal, that it was a walled garden and nobody else could be a banker, and it was
well, I think the top level banks is a walled garden. Like, your average bank probably can't go to the federal government and be like, oh shit, we fucked up, I can't have, we made a bad decision and now we're gonna go broke, can you bail us out?
Yeah.
Your average credit union or local bank can't do that, but JP Morgan can, Chase can,
oh yeah,
Bank of America can.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, that's all we see. We started the episode on a positive note. This is all a good thing.
Yeah, we're gonna end on a positive note too.
No, we aren't. Are you out of your fucking mind?
No. Well, it depends on what your question is, I guess. But all right, let's go into the accounting firm that got the death penalty yesterday.
All right, let's hear it.
All right, so the accounting firm BF Borgers, which I haven't heard of, was given the death penalty yesterday by the SEC, and they have to pay a $14 million fine. Death penalty means they are not allowed to do audits anymore.
Period. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Is this the accounting firm that was running DJT? Trump's?
It's the accounting firm that was auditing Truth Social.
Yes. Okay.
So that's what everybody's reporting it at. They're saying this is a Truth Social thing, but it isn't. In fact, Truth Social is not mentioned at all as any of the companies that had fraudulent audits. I wish they were, but they're not.
Damn it.
So in the filing, they just happen to be the firm that, Trump Media or whoever runs Truth Social used. So it's important to note that publicly traded companies, meaning they're traded on the stock market, you can buy stock in them, they are required by law to be audited by independent accountants annually. Their financial records have to be audited annually. Mm-hmm. That is so that investors can have trust in the financial records of the companies they're investing in. So what BF Borgers was doing was fake audits. They were just, you pay them some money and they'll just fake audit your books, which means, and there were 500 companies listed that they had issued fake audits for, and all of them are publicly traded. I don't know what any of them are, but if there are 500 companies, and it was only over 2 years from 2021 to 2023, but if there are 500 companies that for 2 years, nobody knows how true their financial records are, that could be huge.
Yeah.
That could be huge. So the full effects of that won't really be known until they're audited by a real accounting firm next year. In their next audit, they're going to have to figure out how much of what they were reporting for the past 2 years was a lie.
And there's no conceivable remedy for how their bad behavior influenced people's perception of these other companies. And then in terms of stock prices and investors and things like that, there's no conceivable remedy for that. They can go through this and identify that this audit was bad and it generated, false sense of confidence in this. That's all that it can do. I think there's no remedy.
Yeah. I don't know. I think investors, if they happen to lose money in one of these 500 companies, they probably could sue BF Borgers, but there's not going to be any money to pay them. I mean, they're going to be bankrupt 100%.
Well, okay, but also in the audit of this audit company where they're going to go back and they're going to find out how many other audits were bad, that's got to be a very dodgy thing, because when they do that, and if that's public information, the reconciliation of those bad audits is going to have an immediate, if it becomes public information, will have an immediate effect on those companies that were audited. And that's got to be like, I don't know how they're going to handle that, because the
I would also
act of-
like to, over from 2021 to 2023, the stock market has been pretty much up only. It's been on an incredible bull run.
right.
And investors are making those decisions based on the audited financial records of all the companies they're investing in.
Right.
It's unlikely that BF Borgers is the only audit accounting firm that is doing this. Well, there were several before, like Arthur Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in 2008, 2009, there were a handful of accounting firms that got the death penalty for this exact thing. So it's happened before, and it's happening probably with other firms now. So yeah, how much of the Dow Jones is based on fake information?
Right.
Current Dow Jones, it's like 39,000. How much of that is on fake information?
Well, and at the same time, when they go through and they audit this audit company and they find out that these valuations were inflated, and therefore the confidence that people had in those things was false, the ramification for that is going to be that confidence drops in those specific companies, which it should. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but I'm saying this could lead to, and I think people are going to be looking at the imminent nature of the audit of this audit company, and the stock market should be pulling back until they find out the truth. So it's probably, the whole thing is going to create a dip in a number of things, if I'm thinking this through correctly. Nothing good.
It should, but will it? I don't know.
Yeah, nothing good's going to come from this.
No, it's unlikely. So anyway, that's the big news. It doesn't really have anything to do with True Social, other than the fact that Trump Media happened to use that firm. I can't even tell if Trump Media is one of those 500 companies that had a fake audit. I couldn't even tell that. It doesn't seem like they are, to be honest. So who knows? Plus, Trump Media has only been publicly traded for a few months.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that all their finances prior to being publicly traded, you can lie all you want if you're not publicly traded.
Yeah.
And the IRS might catch you someday, but the SEC doesn't care.
Well, you said that, and it's a fact that it's only been publicly traded for a few months. Oh, never mind. I'm looking at this chart differently, but it's sitting at it's down 0.75 or down 1.54% today to 47. It's been a lot.
Well, that's mainly because another thing you have to do as a publicly traded company is you have to have board meetings, and they're public record also. And they had a financial meeting, an earnings call, they call it, where they talk about the revenue and how much money they were earning, and they were earning nothing. They're just hemorrhaging money. They're not earning a dollar.
Yeah.
And so that shook the investors' confidence.
Well, the same is true for Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. Fuck you.
Oh yeah, it is Twitter.
Yeah. And so they've been bleeding money since Musk took over, and Tesla now, I saw that investors have lost 50% in Tesla over the past few months. Good.
Yeah. Well, the Tesla stock was inflated heavily by hype.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Musk fanboys that were throwing money into Tesla over the past several years. Oh,
yeah, and I guess
overhead light just came on
to back his purchase of Twitter. He used Tesla stock in some portion of it.
Right, that's the collateral for the loans he got.
Yeah, and so everything is tanking for him, and I love that for him.
I do too. He deserves it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You want to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene? First of all, I want to say, did you see the scientists that had a Neanderthal skeleton, and they used AI to create a face for it? Did you see that this week?
No. Maybe I did. I don't remember.
You need to look it up, because how much it looks like Marjorie Taylor Greene is uncanny. I'm not kidding. Now, I don't like to denigrate Neanderthals by comparing them to Marjorie Taylor Greene, but it is crazy how much it looks like her. But anyway, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's been saying she's gonna she wants to oust Johnson. What's his name?
Mike
Johnson.
Yeah.
What a generic name. But anyway, she wants to remove him as speaker. And last week, the Democrat leadership made a statement that if she calls that vote, the Democrats will vote against it and they'll work to keep Mike Johnson in power. Now, I do know Mike Johnson has, compromised a little bit with Democrats and gotten his caucus to vote with the Democrats on some stuff lately, which is actually the whole reason why Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to remove him, because she doesn't like that he does that. But I still don't understand why they would do that.
Because it's the devil it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't, I think.
Yeah, I guess. But with such a thin margin on the Republican majority in the House, and with it being an election year, I guess because it's an election year, you don't need to replace them now when you can replace them in a few months anyway through the election, right? I guess that's the thought.
I assume, yeah.
I don't know. I just found that a little bit strange because they didn't do that for Kevin McCarthy, and they knew him too.
Yeah, and that was the first time that they did that. That was sort of a precedent-setting thing, and they were bluffing their way through the whole fucking thing. And now they're just doing it again. And I think that Democrats are realizing, this we're not going to be able to get anything done if we allow this Freedom Caucus to continue to come in and uproot things. I just want them to be made irrelevant.
Yeah.
And stupid shit like this
it does seem the fact that Mike Johnson got your normal Republicans to vote with the Democrats on the TikTok ban and the aid Ukraine and Israel aid packages. Not that I like any of those packages really, but Johnson got his caucus to vote with the Democrats on that. I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, that shows that he's
less divisive. Yeah,
he's not beholden to the Freedom Caucus. In other words,
right.
Whereas before, even your not necessarily your non-Freedom Caucus Republicans in the House were voting with the Freedom Caucus on everything. So, I guess it's a step in the right direction.
Well, okay, so let's segue over to this. It's not on the outline, but the influence that this entity, the Freedom Caucus, is having feels like it's waning. And a good example of that is the Arizona legislature's passage, of that fucking 1865 abortion ban. It was pretty clear that after that got kicked in gear by the Arizona Supreme Court, that the Republicans in that state were like, maybe this isn't good. And they've been backing off that. So, and I think the philosophy of,
they didn't just back off it, the Republican majority overturned that law.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's in that state, but that whatever that philosophy is that supported that 1865 ban, that's very central to these fucking lunatics in the Freedom Caucus. And so I think that that's having a good ripple effect to make them less relevant. And I think just chipping away at their relevance, it isn't reducing the number of morons in the fucking country that absolutely love this shit, that love the fucking Freedom Caucus and all the Neanderthal shit that they're supporting. There's no fewer of them. I don't think that there's a single, I don't want to say there isn't a single voter that's changed their mind about the value of that bullshit ideology, but I don't know. They're wearing shirts now that say real men wear diapers.
Right.
What the fuck is going on? With pride.
I know. I don't get it. It's a cult, man. It's a cult. They'll do anything.
Yeah.
If we could just get Trump to, push some Jim Jones style Kool-Aid, all of our problems will be gone.
I'd be fucking ecstatic about that. Yeah, there's no bottom. There's no fucking bottom.
I'm sorry, that's funny though. I hope they all start wearing diapers. That'd be hilarious.
Oh, I would love that. And I would. It's a train wreck. Oh my God.
All right, so HR 690, the House of Representatives Bill 6090, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, right?
Yeah.
320 to 91, it passed. What this law actually does, it doesn't make it illegal for you to criticize Israel. You cannot get arrested for criticizing Israel. Some people on TikTok are wanting to say that. I don't understand. Shit is bad enough. You don't have to make up things that make it seem worse, right? But what it does do is it organizations like universities that criticize Israel can lose their federal funding. That's insane.
I'm going to say one thing, and you tell me what this one thing is from. Congress shall make no law.
That's from the First Amendment, buddy.
Yes. And what did they just fucking do?
Yeah.
This seems like it's a slam dunk for a constitutional challenge. It should be an absolute fucking slam dunk for somebody from the ACLU to bring this to whatever court and then move it through the system, and it'll be a slam dunk at every point. This is fucking ridiculous.
Yes, it is ridiculous.
And by the way,
I don't even really know what to say about it.
I saw another TikTok person talking about how when in the fucking 50s or 60s, there was a law passed in Congress that stated specifically that anti-Semitism cannot be equated with the Israeli people. And so the idea that anything speaking against the state of Israel is now considered to be anti-Semitism flies in the face of previous law that was established. And I'll find that TikTok too, and I'll intersplice it here. But there's so much about this fucking act being passed that is contrary to standing law and practices that there's no way. All it's going to take is for somebody to bring this to the fucking court system, and it's going to be made irrelevant. It's
maybe. I mean, I like to think that in 1954, I think it was, when we put "In God We Trust" on our money, that violated the First Amendment too. That was Congress making a law establishing religion, right?
Yes.
And that was 70 years ago, and it's still there. So a lot of people don't know that, by the way. Before I think it was 1954. It was during the McCarthy bullshit is when they put God on our money. Okay. It wasn't there before that. It said E pluribus unum. It did not say "In God We Trust."
Yep.
That was added on because the Russians, the Soviets, were atheists, and they wanted to be as anti-Russian as possible. So they put "In God We Trust" on our money. They put "Under God" in the pledge because that wasn't there before either.
Yep.
But either way, that's establishing religion in my book. It violates the First Amendment. Shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and it's all fucking intertwined with basic nationalism and demagoguery, and it's moving on. Because
I'm gonna skip ahead because I feel like this ties in better. But the International Court of Justice was rumored to be considering issuing arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and some other Israeli military people that have been perpetrating the genocide in Palestine. And Biden has had something to say about that. Mike Johnson's had something to say about that. Several other members of Congress on both sides literally threatening the ICJ, saying, "We'll cut off your funding. You can't do that."
Yep.
Okay, why not? If a law is broken,
I mean, we know. Yeah, but we know why.
I mean, I do get it. I know. Yes, we know why, but it's rhetorical. And that's despicable to me.
They need to push back, and they are pushing back to some degree in terms of just responding to these insinuations from it. And I don't think it's just the Biden administration. I think the other countries that support Israel are taking the same position. They're not taking a hands-off position. But the ICC and the ICJ need to push back hard on this. Otherwise, they become completely irrelevant.
Yeah, the ICJ did actually release a statement yesterday.
Yeah, I saw it.
I want to read it. I mean, I read it, but I want to read it verbatim. Of course, my Google skills aren't as good as they should be, I guess. All right, never mind. Whatever. But one of the things that Biden had said is that they don't have the jurisdiction, and they basically said, yes, we do. So it's our mandate. We are required by our mandate to investigate war crimes, and we'll do that if we want to.
And the Biden administration's position on Israeli war crimes is, oh, Israel is investigating those. Excuse me?
Right.
What?
Yeah. Well, that's the same. I remember during the Iraq War, the ICJ was considering charges against American soldiers for the Abu Ghraib thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Bush telling the ICJ that they didn't have any jurisdiction and that he would never let them do that. It did turn out we did an investigation and did punish those soldiers, but only because the global pressure was so great.
Right.
Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And those soldiers were only punished because it was on camera.
And that's the bigger point, is that information only came out because there was, and I think it wasn't intentional. I think there was somebody who had a conscience that took those pictures and collected that information and pushed it out to the public. I don't think it was an accident that information came out.
No. I lost the outline.
Well, we're segueing right into the rest of Israel.
There it is. All right. All right. University of Alabama. You want to talk about that?
Sure.
So at the University of Alabama, some of these encampments that the students have around the country, counter protesters have been showing up, Zionists. And there's a couple of them we're going to talk about. UCLA, something happened. And at University of Alabama, something happened. What I found interesting about University of Alabama is the counter protesters thought they would piss off the students by chanting "fuck Joe Biden," but instead the students just joined right in.
Like they didn't read the fucking notes before they showed up there.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of hilarious seeing them facing off against each other, but all of them are chanting "fuck Joe Biden." Yeah. It's funny. There's video of it if you want to check it out. But at UCLA, counter protesters showed up and they got violent. Mm-hmm. They were shooting fireworks into the tents, trying to light them on fire. And eventually they broke down the barriers and just started beating people. And I just saw a TikTok this morning. There was a report that came out. The New York Times did it. They did a timeline of events and found out that the Zionists were shooting fireworks at those tents for 3 hours while the police were there, and the police did not intervene. Then they broke down the barricades and went in and started beating people. The police were there and did not intervene. They didn't intervene until people started getting seriously hurt. Mm-hmm. Then they intervened. But I don't know if anybody got arrested. I know they stopped the violence, but I don't know if anybody got arrested. I didn't see anything about that.
Among the counter protesters, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and another thing, if you read the national media's headlines from that event, when that event happened a few days ago, mm-hmm. you would just from the headlines, you would 100% believe that the students were the ones who got violent. 100%. Mm-hmm. In the articles, you would come to find out it wasn't the students; it was these other people. In fact, I saw another TikTok. This guy was made a video where he was talking about he infiltrated the UCLA camp to just see what was going on. This was before, the violence started. And he was saying, I just went in there to see what it was like. I, pretended to be I was with them and went in there and talked to people and stuff. Well, somebody identified that guy, and he was literally a retired Israeli army person.
Oh, wow.
Which is crazy. I mean, that's conspiracy theory territory there, but if that's true, first of all, it wouldn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. Because there were IDF soldiers in New York. I don't know if you remember, there was a protest in New York City maybe a couple months ago.
Yep.
And some American IDF soldiers attack some people there.
Yeah, they threw some chemical into the crowd, and
yeah. So it doesn't surprise me, but that's kind of crazy. But kudos to the New York Times, because the New York Times has been pretty shitty lately. Kudos to them for putting that timeline together and telling the truth about what happened there. All right. At Columbia University, where this all started, the students had been removed from their encampment by police, and they instead went into a building. They broke windows and stuff and broke into a building. Same building that in 1968 students occupied when they're at Columbia University when they were protesting the Vietnam War.
It's the one where they hung the banner, called it Hind Hall instead of whatever it is named.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which also something else about that. When CNN was reporting on that, I didn't recognize the reporter. But when a reporter reported on that sign, she said, and Hind is a Palestinian woman that was killed.
Yeah.
Hind was a 6-year-old girl that was hunted down and murdered by Israeli soldiers, CNN. Get your fucking story straight. I'm sorry, listening to that phone call, even though she's speaking a different language, and I don't understand that, but listening to that phone call where she's begging for help when she's trapped in the car with her dead family, asking for help, is the most heartbreaking thing. And it's also important to note that when help did arrive in the form of an ambulance to rescue her,
they were killed.
Israel bombed the ambulance too.
Yeah. If you're a human being and you watch that story from beginning to end with all of the supporting material, and if you are not destroyed by that story, you're not a human being. I don't give a fuck about you. You don't belong in any dialogue on any topic whatsoever.
100%. Anyway, so I like that the students renamed the hall Hind's Hall. Anyway, police removed them from there too with violence, and there were Columbia faculty that were trying to prevent police from violently removing the students. And one of those faculty members is in the hospital still. He has 9 broken ribs, several lacerations and everything done to him by police. And even though that was known, after that event happened, CNN and others reported that there were no injuries when the police removed those students from there. It's patently false. And it's on video. You can see there is a video of that professor getting beaten, by the way. It's pretty disgusting by police. And there's video of another professor, a Jewish female professor, getting arrested and frisked by police. Anyway, that professor's doctors said that he was lucky to be alive, that his injuries were so severe, he was lucky to be alive. Police did that to him. Okay. All right. Well, good news.
Wait, go ahead. Is the good news on the same topic with the colleges and such?
No.
Okay, then hold on. Let me put this question out there now then. So as I've been watching this stuff, I'm watching the system double down on every move they're making to quash dissent on the topic of U.S. support for countries like Israel. They're doubling down on it from the highest levels to the lowest levels. Biden has come out and supported the police actions against the peaceful protesters, and the local law enforcement, the colleges and universities that these protests are against are just continuing to double down on their efforts to silence these protesters. What I don't understand and what I want to know is, how do they think this ends? What do they think comes after all of this? Because there is a beginning and an end to everything. And so the actions that you have seen that began around, and we can filter this all the way back to BLM protests and such, but let's go back to October 7th and everything that has built up from this since that point, that the system has doubled down against. what do they think comes after all of this? I mean, on one level, I think I know part of the answer to that. They are assuming that this is going to have the same path and momentum that every other protest that we've ever done, going all the way back to fucking Vietnam, is going to have, where it'll happen, it'll reach a peak, and then it'll wane off, and then we'll forget about it. Is that what they're banking on with this?
That's what they're hoping. I would push back on that comment about Vietnam, though. I think the protests against Vietnam had something to do with the ending of the Vietnam War. I really do.
Well,
I mean, I know it was a few years later, but
oh, you mean it had an influence on ending the Vietnam War?
Yeah, I think it did.
Sure.
I don't think it just waned and went away. I think it worked.
So what we're looking for then in all of what's been going on since October is that some change in U.S. policy is going to occur with regard to Israel.
That's what the protesters want. I don't think that's what the administrations of the universities think is going to happen.
Yeah,
I think they think they're just that it's a small group and they'll just squash it and everything will go back to how it was. That's what I think they're expecting. They're wrong. In fact, there's another video. It's a Columbia professor of Arab American Studies. He introduced himself as speaking to the students at Columbia, I think yesterday morning. And he talks about 1968 and how the protests at Columbia against the Vietnam War and how that's celebrated by the university today. And he says, nobody remembers who the administrators who pushed back against those students were. And those students were on the right side of history then. And he said, you are on the right side of history now. And nobody, he said, a generation from now, I don't even remember the Columbia president's name, but he said her name and said, nobody's going to remember her name. You guys are going to be celebrated on the Columbia University website in the future because you're on the right side of history. He's right.
Yeah, true.
So it's going to end badly for these university presidents that are pushing back against it. And it needs to end badly for Biden too. It needs to.
I think it will.
I mean, he has to get consequences for this.
I don't know how he wouldn't be getting, and there's been some insinuation of this over the past couple of months, how he wouldn't be getting the same consequences that the ICC and ICJ are seeking against Netanyahu and his cronies, because Biden is in fact one of Netanyahu's cronies. He's no different. He has provided all of the material support for all of this from the beginning. So how would he not be treated the same by the ICC and the ICJ?
He should be. That same professor, when he was speaking to students this morning, he also mentioned how the United States is heavily involved in the war. He said every plane that is dropping bombs is an American plane. Every bomb that is being dropped is an American bomb. Every bullet that's being fired is an American bullet. And he's right. They are.
Yes.
So I don't see. Yeah, he is aiding and abetting it at the least. But I feel like we're actively involved.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Like
I'd be shocked if we weren't sharing intelligence and stuff like that. I'd be shocked.
We are. We have fucking MQ-9 Reaper drones in the air above Gaza constantly, and we have had them there since fucking October 7th. And the purpose of them being there is to provide intel to Israel. It's if Biden escapes consequences for this, which I wouldn't be surprised if he does, nothing changes. And again, that pushes the ICC and the ICJ more toward irrelevance. And there's going to be some deal struck. If here's what I think, if the ICC or the ICJ decides to put the same pressure on Biden that they're putting on Netanyahu, the Biden administration will offer up Netanyahu to the ICC, ICJ, because there's been some noise within Congress pushing Netanyahu to resign and so on and so forth. But if the ICC and the ICJ put enough pressure on Biden that says we're going to bring charges against you and put a warrant for you, the Biden administration will flip and they will they will not stand in the way of the ICC prosecuting Netanyahu fully. I think he'll be the sacrificial lamb for Biden.
I'd like to point out that there's also enormous protests in Israel against Netanyahu.
Yes.
I mean, there have been. There was another one in Tel Aviv recently.
The one in Tel Aviv, is that the one where they were saying welcome Hezbollah or something? I saw that this morning. They were chanting something about welcoming Hezbollah because they want to. These are protesters that I think want the war to escalate so that Israel takes everything.
I don't know. I didn't see that. I know. The initial protests were mostly they wanted him to. It was just about getting the hostages back. The original protests in Israel were just they wanted the hostages back, and they didn't think Netanyahu was doing enough to do that. To make that happen.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. That was the
It's
core
also,
of it.
Israelis were protesting Netanyahu before any of this happened too, because he's been doing power grabs.
Yeah.
He was trying to change the structure of their government to where he had more power.
Yeah.
And they were protesting him about that. He did it anyway, by the way. So
yeah, we don't get the kind of footage and insights into those protests in Israel the way that we're getting the rest of the information from the rest of the region out there. Israel has very tight controls on what information is coming out regarding what's going on the ground in Israel itself. It's
right.
It's very rare that we get to see what's actually happening there.
All right. One thing that happened in the Israel front is that Colombia, the country, not the university, severed their diplomatic ties with Israel this week.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more countries need to do that. I know some others have.
Mm-hmm. Spain,
I think
is
South
another
Africa
one.
did. Ireland.
But if the only country that was supporting Israel was the United States, it would be enough for Israel. So
of course,
yeah.
And this is why we spend as much money as our military as we do, so we can say fuck you to the ICJ, and we can say, fuck you to all the countries that want Israel to stop the war. That's why that is 100% why we have the military we have, is so that we don't have to listen to anybody else, and our leaders can do whatever the fuck they want.
This is something that happened when I showed up to work on Thursday night. So I show up for my shift, which begins at 4 p.m. and the day shift is filtering out. And it's a mix of uniformed Air Force people as well as contractors and civilian contractors. And the conversation that I walked into when I came in for my shift fucking shocked me, because you got to remember, these people, for the most part, 99% of them are hardcore right-wing MAGA, and that's whether or not they're in uniform or not. And the conversation that was going on was they were talking about recruitment exercises that were going on at college campuses and at expos and things like that by the DOD and the CIA and the FBI and the federal government, basically. And the conversation was, based on everything that we've seen going on in the past however many months, we now know that the entire fucking system is corrupt, that we're sending billions of dollars to Israel and to Ukraine while our fucking systems are falling apart here. Why in the fuck? These are people who work for Department of Defense. These are people who are enlisted folks saying out loud in a skiff, why in the fuck would you want to work for the U.S. government or any branch of the U.S. government knowing what you know now?
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching these people
good.
saying this.
I'm glad those conversations are happening.
Yeah, it fucking shocked me. I didn't join in. I didn't say a word because
I wonder. I mean, I'm an Army vet, and I wonder. I was 98 to 2004. I wonder. I'm trying to think. If I was in there serving today, would I be aware of all this stuff that's going on? I don't know that I would. I was overseas, and all the news I had came from the Armed Forces Network, so it was very controlled.
Yeah.
Or I was in Korea, so I could watch Korean news. I could watch Korean news, or I could watch the Armed Forces news.
Yeah, when I have to go to the MPF every few years to get my CAC renewed, and you sit in the waiting room waiting for them to call you in. The only thing that's on the fucking TV there is either OAN or Fox.
Yeah.
It's been that way forever.
I'd like to think that I would, and I'm glad that that's happening, because that's where you go eventually.
Oh yeah, eventually you wind up there, and hopefully the system isn't so fucking degraded that by the time you get there, there's no point in feeling anything.
Yeah, no, but I mean, what I meant was that when you're pushing back against the government, like the students are doing now, and you're not allowed to do it peacefully in an encampment because they violently expel you. So then you take over a building, and then they violently expel you. Eventually, violence starts going back the other way. It just does. That's what happens.
What do you mean
it happen in other countries?
What do you mean the other way?
I mean, the protest eventually becomes violent.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's
what they want.
That's how it works.
Yeah, that's what they want. Then they can justify the aggression that they're already putting against peaceful protesters.
Right, but I'm saying if it's big enough, big enough, the military might get involved, and if the military is feeling sort of the same way, that's good.
That's a big if.
Yeah, I don't know, because that's the thing. It does seem like I asked this last week, what are the students going to do when the school year ends? It seems like they're going to stay. They've been saying that.
That's what I've been hoping. Yeah,
that they're not leaving. But my question is, what if a ceasefire happens and their university divests? I don't want them to go home then either. I want them to keep fighting for police reform and,
Yeah.
There's more stuff that we need to fight for.
Well, yeah, but if they're going to have any integrity, if the reason that they are protesting is they want specific things like divestment from these attachments to Israel, and if the university they're in acquiesces to that and proves that they're doing that, if they don't back down from what they're doing currently, they lose integrity. I think that if they're going to move this into another arena of things that need to be protested, there's going to need to be a clear basis for doing that. So at this point, they're making specific demands. If the university gives into those demands, then in response to that, otherwise this whole thing becomes less effective. If we don't do what we say we will do in response to asking the university to do what we want them to do, then they'll never acquiesce to anything again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That if they get what they want, they have to do what is commensurate with that, unfortunately. But yes, there will be times for them to come back together to do, and that's the best part of this, is that if this is effective in getting these universities to specifically divest in these cases, then that means the tactics used to influence policy were successful, and those tactics should be repeated, but they need to be repeated in response to a specific incident. That's my point.
Can I have like a 3-minute break? I got some groceries on my doorstep, and some of them need not be sitting in the heat. They just got delivered.
Yeah, go get them.
All right, Baxter, come here. I'm back.
Yay. Why does the color of your microphone look different? Has it always been blue?
Yeah.
Or are there LED lights in it?
There are LED lights in it.
That's what's going on then. Oh yeah. Okay.
It's muted when the light's off
So
and
fancy.
on when the light's on. But the plastic is blue. Although it's not as blue as it looks in the video. It's more navy. I don't know why it looks so bright in the video.
Very, very blue. All right, what else we got?
All right, we got Trump and his gag orders.
Now, I bitched about this when the ruling came down about the contempt, and somebody came back and schooled me on this judge is trying to cross every T and dot every I to make sure that there's no basis for an appeal.
Yeah, I'm sure. So he was fined $9,000, which is nothing, for 9 offenses of contempt of court for violating the gag order.
Yeah, it was performative. The whole thing was performative.
But it's important to note that he learned nothing because the very next day he's given a speech in Wisconsin and he violated the gag order in his Washington, D.C. case at that speech. So...
Well, and the fact that he was officially found in contempt, that means he committed that is commission of a crime. That is breaking the law, which violates the conditions of all of his other bonds. So these other fucking judges could fucking remand him to custody based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And
anyone could. And this judge in New York City did say that if he violates the gag order again, he will remand him to custody. We'll see if he does, because there's no way he's not going to violate that.
Yeah.
He does not know how to shut the fuck up. In fact, there's a funny video I saw on TikTok where he was giving a speech somewhere, and Fox, you know how Fox covers all of his speeches. But it looked like he was starting to go a little off the rails and he was going to say something he shouldn't, and they cut away.
Oh yeah. I saw that. Yeah. And he was also just fucking babbling. The shit he was saying was so incoherent. Oh, where he's talking about master locks.
Yeah, and how they're puzzles.
What?
Those are good little puzzles, he said. What the fuck are you talking about? I don't know.
There's going to be t-shirts that come out that say real men have dementia. That the Democrats are going to do that next, because they do this whole thing, this tit for tat with the stupidity, like the whole dark brand. When Trump was a superhero on his playing cards, his trading cards, then they came up with Dark Brandon. Now it's real men wear diapers. I guarantee you a Democrat's going to come out with real men have dementia, or real men sniff kids, right, or whatever the fuck. Right. You said we were
all right. Last on the list. Now this one I think is funny. I think it's lighthearted. I think it's good news to me. There's an Austrian company called Migaloo that is going to build a luxury submarine for the super wealthy. It costs $2.3 billion. I would love it. I'd love it. The amount of stuff that can go wrong on a submarine. I want all the billionaires to be in submarines. Wrong. I want the workmanship to be just as good as it was on the Titan sub. It's amazing. I don't know if it'll ever get built, if anyone will buy it, but because it's not a real thing. It's just a design and a plan to build. They're looking for people to order it.
It certainly accentuates the flagrant excess of wealth and the fact that there's a fly in here. That
actually, you know who's going to buy it? A Saudi prince. A Saudi prince will buy one.
Oh, sure.
Sultan of Brunei, he might buy one.
Yeah.
Those are the people that'll buy them.
Okay, I've got a funny Sultan of Brunei story for you.
Cool.
Back in the early 90s, when I was working in a drug treatment center, and it was a nonprofit and state funded and so forth, me and my buddy who worked there decided that we're going to find additional funding sources for our treatment center, right? And we had learned about the Sultan of Brunei somehow, and we tracked down a phone number to his palace, his office in Brunei, and we called the Sultan of Brunei, and somebody answered, and they spoke English, very heavy accent. But we went and we talked with them for probably 30 or 40 minutes on the phone, saying that we work for this fantastic program in the United States and we're really strapped for cash and we really need additional funding. Could you talk to the Sultan and see if he would help fund our drug treatment program in South Texas? And this person listened to everything that we said and asked clarifying questions. And we were so fucking awestruck at the end of the conversation. And nothing ever came of it. Nothing ever happened. But I don't know what you couldn't do that today. I don't even know how we would start. This was before the internet. How'd we
find a number without the internet?
How did we get this fucking number? We did. I don't know how we did, but we did. Fuck.
Yeah. We should do a whole episode where we talk about how we did things before the internet.
Right?
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, like fucking maps.
Yeah. Do you remember, you ever get a triptych from AAA?
No.
You're going on a long road trip, you go to AAA, and they would take a bunch of maps stapled together, trace your route out on it, and it included like construction areas and stuff like that.
Wow.
But it was a paper booklet you would flip through on your way through the trip.
Well, I mean, when I moved in 2000, when I moved from Texas to Vermont, me and my son, there was no GPS on phones yet. The smartphones were very rudimentary, and there was no such thing as GPS and mapping and so forth. But MapQuest did exist, and so
you'd print it out.
Yes, I had fucking.
You'd have a pile of 8.5 by 11 papers in your passenger seat. Yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, me and a 5-year-old child and a Boston Terrier and a Jeep Wrangler going from South Texas to Vermont using the fucking MapQuest printed out maps, going through the Jersey Turnpike. Holy fuck, the GW Bridge and all that shit. And those pieces of paper got me from point A to point B. I couldn't do that today. I couldn't fucking
I'll tell you another thing you can't do today. When I first moved to Atlanta, after my first day of work, I got lost on my way home from work. And I had a laptop with me, though. So I just pulled into a neighborhood, pulled into someone's driveway, and connected to their wireless and pulled up MapQuest and got the rest of my route. You can't do that today either because everybody's network is secured now, but that didn't used to be the case.
Oh, yeah. Everything was wide open. We didn't care. Fuck. Well, like, okay, Cox Internet had something of a monopoly here, and they had a good deal where you could opt out of this, but by default you were opted in. It was Cox. Where you could provide your Wi-Fi signal from your house to anybody walking by that has a Cox account. And I liked that about Cox because I could be driving around and I could connect to anybody's Cox's Wi-Fi that was left open, but it's not open. You're signing in with your Cox account and that gets you their Wi-Fi. Now, when I first got set up with them, my big concern with that was, you're telling me I only have a gigabyte of data bandwidth per month. Somebody else connects to my Wi-Fi connection because I allow them to in this situation. Does that count against my cap? And they said, no, it doesn't. I don't know how the fuck that works, but they said, no, it doesn't. Because I would go to other people back when it was open. I used to go fucking park out in front of people's houses to download movies and shit because it was not eating my fucking data cap because I had a data cap.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just steal movies from other people's internet.
Good stuff. I used to have a set of encyclopedias so that when I'd be having conversations with people and like, you know how like questions come up and you're like, oh, I'll just Google it like in a conversation.
Yeah.
And
you mean physical books?
Physical books. Yeah. I had one for years. I don't have it anymore. I don't know what I did with it. Left it somewhere when I moved.
Encyclopedia Britannica.
Because the internet now exists. You don't need it. But yeah, we used to look up stuff in the encyclopedia to settle arguments and stuff.
Yep. And you remember when we went from 3.5-inch floppies to CD-ROMs?
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that came out was hugely popular was Microsoft Encarta.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that was fucking that was vital. That shit's useless today.
There was a game. There was a geography game on Encarta
Yeah.
that when I was originally in college in 1997 was super popular. We'd all get high and play this geography game. It had like flags, and you had to know what country the flag went to. It would show you pictures, and you would have to guess what country that picture was taken in. That was a part of the CD-ROM for Encarta.
Yep.
Used to love that.
It's crazy. Well,
we're old. We're old.
Yeah, well,
I wake up old every morning and I hate it.
So we rolled way past an hour this time, hour and 15 minutes. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will find, and this, by the way, that's the end of this episode. Thank you, everybody, and see you next time.
Like, subscribe, share, whatever. Argue with us,
please,
if you want.